All right, welcome, folks, to our first video for AP Literature. Sorry, I'm probably gonna have to whisper for most of this because my daughter is sleeping and she gets woken up very easily. So I'll make this bigger. The first poem we'll be covering is "The Convergence of the Twain" by Thomas Hardy. First thing we want to do is look at the prompt, obviously, figure out what it's asking so that during our first reading we can annotate things related to the prompt and start to craft a thesis based on that. So read the following poem carefully, then taking into consideration the title of the poem, analyze how the poetic devices convey the speaker's attitude toward the sinking of the ship. Okay, so it's a pretty simple prompt. Some ship will be sinking. That's already been revealed to us, and all we have to do is try to figure out what the speaker's attitude is towards this sinking ship and how the poet communicates or conveys that speaker's attitude. So it's this part, the poetic devices. So those are little literary tricks that we've talked about throughout the whole year: imagery, figurative language, personification being one of them, metaphor, parallelism, repetition, things like that, or juxtaposition, contrast, all sorts of things of that nature. But sort of one reason I chose to assign this to you is if you watched the AP video on the playlist that I sent you, this is a really good series. I suggest you do watch them. One thing that they've talked about that I've noticed in things that I've read from AP graders, that they really want you guys, when you're writing, to find some sort of shift in the poem or passage and analyze that shift. Now, the shift could be shift of tone, shift of topic, shift of setting, shift from cause to effect, or action to reaction, things like that. But it seems like they always give poems or passages from prose or longer plays or something like that that contain some sort of, at least one, obvious change in that vein, some sort of obvious shift in topic or tone or mood, something like that. So this has one, and what we're going to try to do is figure out where that is, and then how maybe you could use that to structure your essay so that, and I've already gotten some of your essays back, the ones that did well sort of noticed that shift, whether they explicitly pointed out or not. Other ones, I feel like you guys were all over the place. The progression of ideas in your essay didn't seem to be building up logically to any sort of big payback at the end, or payoff, I should say. So let's just go through this. The first thing you want to do, look at the title: Convergence of the Twain. So we always want to analyze titles, especially for poems. We want to figure out why the poet decided to call it this. Convergence means a coming together of things, and Twain just means two. So this literally means the convergence, the coming together of two things. And then the subtitle tells us that it's lines on the loss of the Titanic. So what did the Titanic contact? The iceberg. So we already can infer that if we know just the slightest bit of history. So we can go, well, first let's look at it. Something stands out to me right away about the structure, which can help you guys. It seems to be organized into these 3-line stanzas, which are clearly marked off. So maybe each one is a different topic. That'd be odd, probably not. Maybe a line of thought runs throughout a certain set of them, and then we can analyze that set together, maybe in one body paragraph, and choose our quotes from them. And then maybe after the shift, do that later on. Let's see here. We'll start at the beginning. In a solitude of the sea, deep from human vanity and the pride of life that planned her, stilly couches she. So it seems like, if you can visualize this already, we have the Titanic laying at the bottom of the ocean, far away from this human vanity. It sounds like arrogance, and then that's sort of confirmed in the next line. pride of life that planned her. So picture this monument to human hubris and arrogance, vanity, sort of in a tomb at the bottom of the sea, just laying there, having failed in its mission. So that sets the stage for us. Second stanza. Steel chambers late the pyres of her salamandrine fires, cold currents. Third. Now you'll notice these things go down to the bottom. Where is that there? Third. Just means thread. And the second one was salamander. What the hell? How do I go up? There we go. So these chambers of late were the pyres. Those are the things that things get burned on top of the sort of like towers. And salamanders apparently were things that were believed not to burn, but were also red. Cold currents thread through and turn to rhythmic tidal lyres. So what was once maybe the coal fire that was fueling the ship, something like that. I don't know how you power ships, but I'm pretty sure that's how it worked. Now instead of fire, now there's a little contrast here. It's cold water, rhythmically, like waves or tides, sort of hitting it like a lyre, which is an instrument. So there's like almost a musical nature to it. A third stanza. Over the mirrors meant to glass the opulent, the sea worm crawls, grotesque, slime, dumb, indifferent. So now we have, again, so it seems like at least these three stanzas at the start are all connected thematically. So no shift has happened yet. Now it's talking about what was inside the ship. More specifically, what maybe the passenger areas were like, where there's these mirrors meant to glass the opulent. Opulent means rich, luxurious people. But now that's contrasted with what is currently happening to those monuments to human wealth and vanity. The sea worm is now crawling over in its grotesque slime, dumb, and different. Sort of like Hamlet was talking about with Claudius, that kings become worm food, and then the fish eat the worms, and then a peasant or a beggar eats the fish. The circle of life type deal. It's sort of reflected here. What was once meant for the most beautiful accomplishments of humankind are now nothing but a place for worms to crawl over. And it's ugly, slimy, gross, and doesn't care, which might even be worse, actually. That if you wanted to pick one word to analyze, should you decide to go down this path, these things, these glass mirrors for the rich were obviously meant, and we'll get down here later, this is confirmed with jewels and stuff like that. These things that were meant to show off and draw attention, reflect importance. Maybe the worst fate that could befall them is to be treated indifferently, like the worm, just not caring at all. Fourth stanza. Jewels and joy designed to ravish the sensuous mind. So, I was kind of right. I sort of predicted where this was going. The jewels that are meant to grab your attention and draw you in lie lightless, all their sparkles bleared and black and blind. So that which was meant to dazzle is now dull, dark. There's no light to be reflected, so there's just nothingness. So once again, there might be some irony in that. There's definitely tragedy in that. Fifth stanza. Dim moon-eyed fishes near gaze at the gilded gear and query, what does this vaingloriousness down here? Interesting. So now, dim moon-eyed fishes near gaze. So I wouldn't say this is quite personification. It's more anthropomorphism, but so what that is like in cartoons, like Mickey Mouse is not personification. He just is a talking mouse. Like he's a mouse that acts like a person. That's anthropomorphism, not personification, which is like Cupid, like an abstract concept turned into a person that has the qualities of that concept. So these are, I guess you could just say personified fishes, though, for simplicity's sake. There's fish sort of hanging out, looking at the Titanic and saying, whoa, vanity. Vaingloriousness is like hubristic vanity. Um, and arrogance. What does this vainglorious is down here? So the fish are just sort of like, how did you end up here? Temple of vainglory. Next one. Well, while was fashioning this creature of cleaving wing, the imminent. Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Did you guys notice this? Sort of trailing off, and then it's almost like a question answer situation. I would say, folks, this is the shift between the fifth and the sixth stanza. Just upon a quick reading, that seems like what's happening here. So the fish wonders, how did this happen? How did this monument of human arrogance get down here? Well, someone's answering the speaker. While was fashioning or creating this creature of cleaving wing, the imminent will that stirs and urges everything. So imminent will, some sort of life force, God figure, God spirit, take that as you will, prepared a sinister mate for her, so gaily great, a shape of ice. Ooh. The kid's standing up in her crib. Go to sleep. Okay, she laid back down. The imminent will, God or life force, stirs and urges everything. It sounds more like a God. Prepared a sinister mate. Ooh, created like a double or a foil for her, so gaily great, a shape of ice. Okay, so the world, the spirit of the world, God, something bigger, the imminent will, Hardy calls it. It seems like prepared a sinister mate for her, almost on purpose. It seems like the world responded to human arrogance with something of equal force, a shape of ice for the time far dissociate. Interesting. So it seems like Hardy is claiming to some extent that the world reacted, the imminent will. So this actually would be personification. So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. This is the equal and opposite reaction. Human arrogance built the Titanic, which again, for those of you who don't know, was marketed as something that would be impossible to sink, like the pinnacle of human achievement. And Hardy seems to be saying the Earth was like, no, not so quick. Here's an iceberg that's still more powerful. So you think you can dominate the Earth? No, the Earth will dominate you back. Something like that. Might be where he's going. But there's definitely a change now. Because up until this point, and if you were going to structure your essay like this, whatever your thesis is, of course, present in your introduction, maybe first body paragraph, you talk about the first 5 stanzas and what they are doing. Because they are all describing the image of the ship at the bottom of the sea and different aspects of the ship, trying to create some sort of mood and make some sort of argument about it there. And then we shift. So maybe second body paragraph. The 6th stanza begins, it begins speaking about the Earth's response to the arrogance, to answer the fish's question of how the ship ended up down here. So anyway, now I'm rambling. Here we go. Stanza 8. And as the smart ship grew in stature, grace, and hue, in shadowy silent distance grew the iceberg too. Continuing on with so these are definitely connected, these 3 stanzas. Continuing the idea that everything that was added to the Titanic, every little bit of vainglory, had its counterpart in the iceberg. The iceberg grew with the ship. Let's see. Next stanza. Oh, why it's doing okay. Here we go. Stanza 9. Alien they seemed to be, no mortal eye could see. Oh, I'm not reading this properly. You got to stop here a little bit. Sorry for that. Alien they seemed to be. No mortal eye could see the intimate welding of their later history. It was actually sort of a nice little lesson in enjambment. For poems, you want to follow the punctuation. So if the line doesn't end in a comma or period, just keep going to the next line. That's what enjambment means. So here I actually should pause because of that colon. Alien they seem to be. No mortal eye could see the intimate welding of their later history. And you would just read that through like that. So anyway, so this seems to be saying that they seem so different from each other. The natural and the man-made, perhaps that contrast, which again could be something that could be a theme you analyze throughout the whole thing, the contrast between the natural world and the man-made world. Um, no mortal eye no mortal eye could see. It seems like it's talking specifically about humans. No human could see how these two things would eventually conflict. Or to go back to the title, what the hell is the goddamn title? The convergence, when they converge. Sorry. Here we go. 10th stanza. The intimate welding of their later history, or sign that they were bent by paths coincident on being a non-twin halves of one august event. So these read one right into another. The separation is almost arbitrary at this point. So no human being could see what would eventually happen to them, or sign that they were bent by paths coincident, or even figure out that these two things were going to converge, being twin halves of one august event. So they're parallel in some sense. Sorry, kid woke up again. You have like a yin and yang type thing going on here. Once again, a dichotomy. Last stanza. Till the spinner of the years said now, and each one hears, and consummation comes and jars two hemispheres. So this, I don't know if this is meant to be the imminent will again, just another name for that same force, or if this is spinner of the years sounds like that which is in, or he or she, it seems like it's personified, who is in control of the wheel of fortune or fate. Again, something Hamlet would care a lot about. So no one could have seen this happening until the wheel of fortune and the person in charge of it said now. And each one hears and consummation comes. That's a convergence, that's a conflict, and jars two hemispheres. So what is this? This is the crashing of human arrogance into the natural world, which seems like a humbling force. The two hemispheres, if you take that literally, I mean, it just means the East and the West, America and Europe. Could it be also jarring both the natural world and human ambition as well? If you wanted to take it as a metaphor, I suppose you could. And you could probably elaborate on that in a way that would sound convincing, whether or not you actually believe that. So real quick, let's go over. Hopefully you followed my little verbal annotations. If I were to structure this, the themes would have to be the conflict between the natural world and human ambition or human arrogance. Like there has to be something about that in here for you to get the sophistication point. Now, what point you make about that topic, well, that's up to you. But I would say if you don't address it, you're missing something important about what Hardy's trying to do here. I would also say, whatever points you try to make, this poem, despite it being separated into 11 sections, I believe it was in the end, it seems like it's by content, there's a separation or shift. Remember, that's the word. You could say something like, to start that second body paragraph, in stanza 6, the focus of the poem shifts to blank, and then analyze that. So I would say introduction, thesis, something about the convergence of the Twain, these two forces of human ambition and vanity and the natural world. Talk about the imagery, perhaps, and the significance of it, metaphorically or not, in the first 5 stanzas. That would be your first body paragraph. Second body paragraph, I would analyze the last few paragraphs, or at least the shift that starts in paragraph 6. And then I think a conclusion if you want to do something, that's like if you want to do like a basic essay that's structured in a way where the ideas would flow into one another. Intro, body paragraph 1 talks about the consistent ideas developed in the first 5 stanzas, and then the response to that in the 6th through 11th stanza, and then a conclusion. I think you'd be good to go. I will say this though, and I might say this again if we have a virtual class tomorrow on this poem. If you might run into trouble if you try to structure essays based on, and I see a lot of people doing this, is why I'm mentioning it, based on literary device instead of sort of working through the passage or poem chronologically and picking out like the most important scenes and then analyzing what they do regardless of what device is happening. It's not to say you should leave out the devices you're going to focus on from your introduction or anything like that. That just means try not to structure it so that you go intro, first body paragraph, I'll just make this up, focuses on personification, and then you're jumping all over the poem randomly, finding examples of personification. Then your second body paragraph focuses on imagery, but you're jumping again throughout the poem. That's what's keeping some of your writing from presenting a logical progression of ideas that sort of build a consistent line of reasoning that will sort of climax in your conclusion. That's what you want to get to. So try that out. I'll post this at some point Monday night, most likely. So you guys, if you watch this then, we'll have Tuesday and Wednesday until 11:59 to turn it in. My kid is waking up now. Thanks for watching. I hope this helped. If not, well, tomorrow at about 1 o'clock, I'll have a virtual class, sort of the same format. And you guys can talk back to me in that. So later, everybody.